So yes guys, welcome to the 17th tutorial video and video in the tutorial series. And in this video we're going to be looking at vectors and yes, basically what vectors are and basically what they are and how we're going to use them and integrate them into our game. So first things first is we need to know what a vector is inside mathematics. So I just went in to Google and I googled what vectors are. Well, it's not Google, is it? Bing. I'm using Bing anyway. So yeah. So and there we go. So vectors are defined as an object containing both magnitude and direction. So what this means is basically a vector is anything that has a direction and it has a magnitude or a size. So for example, I don't know how to say it. Like for example, weight. Weight is a vector quantity. Reason being this, it's measured in newtons, it's got a size, and it also has a direction which is downwards. Speed isn't a vector because it's only got a speed. Like you can only be traveling at I don't know, for example 100 kilometers per hour, but you're not traveling in a certain direction. Velocity, however, is a vector because it has a speed and a direction. You can be traveling at 100 kilometers per hour north or 100 kilometers per hour northeast. It doesn't really matter. So that's velocity, and yeah. So now, what are vectors inside game programming? So in game programming, when I say game programming. So in-game programming is basically that. Vectors are used to store directions and they're also used to they're basically used to store directions as well as my internet is slow. So it's basically used to store directions and positions. So in game programming we can use vectors as scalars and vectors. We can use them as a quantity to just store a position or its direction as well. So this isn't coming up. So anyways, let me just read this short text. So in game development, vectors have 2 or 3 dimensions depending on whether you're making a 2D or a 3D game and are generally used to represent geometrical properties of objects within the game. For example, can represent a rotation, a position, and etc. Okay. And etc. and etc. and all that nice stuff. So anyway, so I think my internet's too slow today, so what I am going to do is simply just move on into doing the programming. So since we have some sort of idea what a vector is, I'll just go ahead and create a new package and I'll name it math. It's going to have lots of math. It's going to have lots of math. It's going to have all these vectors and stuff, and we're going to create a new Java class and we're going to name it vector 2. So the naming convention is basically you name vector, and then if it's for 2D you write a 2 and whatever, and what units you're going to use. If it's an integer you're going to use I, if it's a float you're going to use F, if it's a double you're going to use D. Since we're working with floats, we're going to just say vector 2f. There we go. And basically what vector is going to have is just going to have 2 values. If it's not 3, it's just simply going to have 2 values, and that is an x and a y coordinate. So I'm just going to make this public. You can make them private and then create sketches and setters. So public float x, y, and there we go. Now we're going to create a constructor for the vector class, vector 2f. So there's this. We're going to create another constructor. So I'm just going to copy and paste this to save time. I'm tired of making long videos. There we go. So first thing is, so yes, the first one is just gonna set this equal to 0, x equals to 0, and y equals to 0. The next constructor, we're gonna take in a float x and float y, and we're just simply gonna say this dot x equals to x, this dot y equals to y, and that's about it. So what are the basic things we can do with vectors? And we can simply add vectors, subtract vectors, and do lots of other fancy stuff with vectors, dot products, cross products, and all this other stuff. So but for now, I'm just simply going to have a few things, a few functions. So we can add two new functions: public vector 2f, add. So this function will basically add vector a, we get vector b, vector a, and we're going to return a new vector, vector 2f. X plus a dot x, and then y plus a dot y, and there we go. So basically, you're probably wondering what this is. Why do we have a method? Well, we can have methods that return this class's object. I don't know how that works, but it works. So you have a method that returns an object of the class, and it works properly and perfectly. So yeah, I'm also going to have a subtract function. Sub, I'm just going to name it sub. We're going to have a multiplication function. I'm just going to name it mul. No, we're going to call it scale. You don't multiply vectors, you scale vectors. So you're going to scale, and you're going to scale it by value, float, scale value, and we're just simply going to multiply these two values. Just going to multiply x by scale and y by scale. I'm going to multiply that by scale. The other thing where I forgot to change is this minus thingy. Changing the plus to a minus. The addition to a subtraction, and there we go. And what else do we need to have? We need to have a divide. Divide. I'm just gonna name it div, and I'm just gonna change scale to value, but we're going to divide this stuff. I'll just rename this from scale to value, refactor, rename. And we might also need to know the length of a vector. So public is going to return a float. Public float get length length, and we're going to return math.square root x times x plus y times y. So where does this come from? This comes from Pythagoras and all this other mathematical stuff. I'm not going to explain this. If you want to know what Pythagoras is, you can just go Google it, and yeah, there we go. Pythagoras theorem and all this other stuff. Where you have this, and yes. So that's the length. We also need to calculate the distance between two vectors. I'm just going to create this. I'm going to make this function public static. Calculate distance. calculate distance. Now I'm just gonna name it distance. In fact, I'm not gonna make it static. I'm just gonna make it public float distance, and we're gonna take in a vector b, vector 2f, and what we're going to say is simply return a sub b dot length dot get length and gth, and there we go. Okay, I need to reflect. I need to change this from lowercase capital, and there we go. So what this does basically, yeah, I'm not gonna try and explain this. It's very difficult for me to explain mathematical stuff because I'm not that good in maths and explaining stuff. I mean, I'm a complicated person, you see. So it's much more easier for a person who's simple to explain something because they understood the something in the whatever the topic in a simpler level, so it's easy for them to explain in a simpler way. But I am a kind of complicated person, so it's going to be harder for me to explain vectors to you guys. So I'm just gonna write down the code and you just copy this code, and we're going to have something else, and we're gonna call this public public vector 2f normalize. So this is basically where you return, where you normalize a vector, and you can Google that. Normalizing vectors, you can just Google that. So basically it means to normalize a vector, therefore is to take a vector of any length and keeping it point in the same direction, changing its length to 1, turning it into what is called a unit vector. Since it's described, yes, so it's a lot of it's not easy to understand, so you need to kind of like go through this whole website and to do lots of research on that. But yeah, guys, my explanation skills aren't that great, as you can tell throughout the videos. So yeah, so normalize, so we're just gonna take the length. So what we're gonna do is we're going to divide this vector by the length. Divide by get length. So basically when you normalize a vector, you simply divide the vector by its length. And I think that's it for now for vectors and all this stuff. That is it. So we're done with vectors. So how can we use them inside our game and all that stuff? So we already created the vector class. Now it's up to us to use it. And for example, in fact, I'm just gonna do that in the next video. So this is basically introduction to vectors. It was a poor introduction, and I do apologize for that. But yeah, so guys, if you think that you understood the video, guys, you can like the video, or you can simply comment in the description and tell me how I could have tried and explained this section better. So guys, peace.